Okay, so I was supposed to make this video yesterday, but I didn't feel like it. I changed my mind and ended up not doing it, so it doesn't make as much sense today because I didn't really like my hair is like kind of up a little bit, but I didn't style it as much, so it's not as accentuated, right? But so I was this idea for this whole thing came from me. What I like to do, you've probably seen it in other videos, is I like to kind of style my hair up and like put it up a little bit in the front, like not like crazy tall, right? But like just like a little something. And for some reason, I think that I look better like that, right? So that's my reasoning for doing that. I like how it looks, right? But I was doing it yesterday morning, right? And I'm putting it in like I'm styling my hair, and I was thinking to myself like, why do I think that this looks better? Why do I think I look better like this? Like, this is interesting. Um, because, like, I don't know, it's just like a weird thing. Like, why does it feel like more right for me to look like this? Like, what's the reasoning behind that? Like, what's going on in my head that kind of gives me this, opinion of myself, right? And so, um, and so, what I kind of came to with this is like I don't know if this is a real thing. It very well could be that what I'm gonna say here it might have relevance, but it's not like the real reasoning. Look, thinking about it right now, another reasoning could be that I've just seen other people that have styled their hair in this way, and I liked how they looked, and maybe they looked respectable and authoritative and stuff, and like they knew what they were doing maybe, and so I have now internalize that, and now I like to style my hair like that because it makes me think that I am like those people that I have this idea of what they are in my head. So it could be entirely a social thing. I see and therefore I do, right? But my other opinion on this is that it really got me thinking, like about like maybe it makes my head look bigger because like when I put my hair, like if I don't like style it up a little bit, then my hair kind of like covers my forehead a little bit, right? And then I have kind of like bangs and it's all flat, and I like my head looking like flat and like the bangs just like covering my forehead and stuff. I don't think it looks as good. Not that like I can't look like that, but like I just don't think it looks as like if I was going to dress my best, right, I'm gonna try and style my hair up a little bit. And what I'm trying to get down to is why I would do that. But I thought maybe, well, it makes my head look bigger, it makes my face look bigger, and maybe that is kind of like a remnant of our past, like of our evolutionary history. Because I also thought about, well, there's also like big hats. Like why is big hats a thing? Like a lot of important people, right, wear big hats or some kind of hat, right? And wearing a hat almost kind of like distinguishes your level of importance, right? So we have things like crowns for like royal crowns. We have in Egypt they had like their royal crowns or like these massive hats. Um, and then they also have the Pope has a big hat. A lot of the other like cardinals and stuff have big hats. Top hats, which was a thing at one point, which is not really as popular now, but top hats, having a big top hat, that was like, showing your level of like sophistication and importance. So having a big top hat was like a big thing for a while. And so things like that, I just thought was interesting because it's like, like this is making my head look bigger in a sense, right? But hats also make your head look bigger. So maybe there's some connection there. And so, then I was like, okay, well, why does a big hat make you look important, right? And it's like, oh, okay, the big head. Well, why a bigger hat, larger seeming head. If you have a larger seeming head, then, maybe that automatically in our minds, like passively, we see someone with a bigger head and we think, oh, they have greater authority than us. They must know more. They must be more respectable, right? Potentially an older and therefore wiser person. And so the reason why I think that this might be in our brain is like a child, right? You look at a child, they're not as fully formed, so you're not going to look at a child with their little baby head and be like, oh, they know what they're doing, right? But a child may look at their parent And when they see their parent, they recognize their head most of all, right? Their face most of all. That's how you recognize who a person is. You identify a person by their face. And therefore, when you look at a person with a larger face, typically that's someone older than you, and therefore most likely someone that's worth listening to because they've lived longer. And if they've lived longer, they probably know more. And if they know more, then what they're telling you is probably good information. Therefore, I think that a part of our, like, the people that survived the most are those that listened to their elders, basically, because their elders survived as long as they did for a reason, right? And so if you decided, I'm not listening to you, right, then you end up dying, right? And then your poor choice has been now recorded. Okay, that was a poor choice. People that choose poorly do not live on, right? And so all the ones that listened to the big head lived on, because typically the big head's advice was good advice, a majority of the time, right? It's not saying it's 100%, they're always right, But more often than not, if they said, watch out for that tiger, it was good advice or something along those lines, right? And so I think that nowadays this is kind of not needed anymore, but somehow we discovered that this is a tendency, that people tend to listen to you more when you have a seemingly larger head. And so we have like big hats and stuff like that. And so I think that this is kind of like a hacking of our evolved brain of sorts. And so people have found a way to like exploit a part of our, initial code, basically, like the way our mind works. And so they have realized, people tend to listen to me more when I have a big hat on, and, it is kind of been exploited and now being used for maximum benefit in a way that was unintended, but is still, like at this point, like it's part of how we work. So it's just there, and it was never meant to be used that way, but now it is. And so typically all the people of importance have big hats, in a way that like kind of demonstrates their importance, basically. The bigger your hat, the more important you are in a lot of systems, which is kind of funny, just like thinking about it. It's like, oh, I have the biggest hat. People are more inclined to listen to someone with a large head. I don't have any evidence for this. I don't have proof for this. This is just what I'm saying. But there's a potential tie, Neanderthals, when Homo sapiens were introduced into introduced themselves into the lands where the Neanderthals were. There's evidence to point towards the Neanderthal men being more favorable for both the Neanderthal women and the Homo sapien women to mate with. And the reasoning for this goes two ways. Either the women found the traits of the Neanderthal man more attractive, and therefore selected them over Homo sapien men, or the Neanderthal men were just stronger and therefore were able to overpower any other influence and therefore dominated the scene. You can kind of see this with, like, I think in like gorillas, like the alpha male gorilla. I don't know a whole lot about gorillas, but from my understanding, the alpha male gorilla kind of has reign over the women, and I think that the beta men can kind of like sneak in there and get some action, but typically they all mate with the alpha male. And he has dominance over all of them. And anyone that tries to test him, he is like, nuh-uh, right? And so there's two ways to look at that. I don't know for sure, and I don't know if anyone can really say they know for sure. So there's the tie-in with the Neanderthal for selection, potentially, and with a greater forehead. Once that selection kind of happens, eventually the women are going to, like, the generations that come afterwards, whatever initiated that preferable selection is now going to proliferate out. And so therefore, whatever attraction there was towards Neanderthals is heightened through time. And so because of this, I'm pretty sure Neanderthals had a typically larger like forehead or bone structure or something along those lines. I could be totally wrong about that. I don't know. But my theory is that they did. So anyway, so they were naturally seen as, so potentially because they had a bigger head, right, and they had a larger face, it could be the potential where I'm going with this is that because their head was larger than Homo sapien men, they were naturally seen as more credible and wiser and more worth listening to than the Homo sapien men compared to Neanderthals, right? Neanderthals, with their bigger heads and larger foreheads and things like that, just naturally seemed more authoritative than that of a Homo sapien. And because of that, they were more selected, potentially, right? And that was kind of, I guess, a hacking on their side of our brain and how our brain functioned, right? They just naturally had the dominant trait there, but over time they kind of intermingled, and the features kind of blended back into a more Homo sapien look, with maybe some remnants, right? But it's more Homo sapien look over time. And it could also be seen that there's a potential reputation, because if we were going off the alpha male look at things, the alpha male is typically probably the oldest in the group or near the oldest in the group, and therefore is someone who has lived the longest and is strong and is capable of maintaining the cohesion of the community while also protecting the community, and therefore would have been seen as someone that was potentially wise in their community. And so not only did they have the face structure that backed that up, but they potentially had a reputation that backed that up as well. And so by this, this has kind of been ingrained into how our brain functions and how we see, potential mates and potential leaders and things along those lines. So I just thought that was interesting. This could also tie into, having, again, going back to how I style my hair up, having larger hair, could be brought into this as well. If you had more hair, could also make it look like you had a larger face, and therefore also ties into, like, we go into like beards, like long hair and long beard and stuff is also seen as a wise and sage person, because typically you have to be old in order to have, a large beard like that, right? And so having large hair and large beard is also seen as a sage thing as well. And so this could also tie into why we look at a person that has like a beard and say, oh, like, they seem older, they seem wiser, they seem more mature when they have a beard on their face compared to, no beard, because, well, typically someone that had the time and the capability to grow a beard was older and therefore typically wiser. And that's not so much the case anymore, because survival is not as much of a factor, right? But for a long time, like comparatively, a majority of our history, that was the case. Nowadays, it's not so much. You could grow a beard and be an idiot. It doesn't matter. So, even so though, there does still live that sort of, like passive, unintentional, what's the word? Association. And so, there's a tie there. This could also get into women. Like, women typically had larger hair, so listen to your parents. Your mom had potentially typically more hair, and therefore was a good person to listen to. Listening to your mother was potentially a good idea. As she was probably the one taking care of you, and therefore was telling you, hey, don't eat that. Hey, don't touch that. Things like that. And so therefore that was kind of also ingrained in our psyche, I guess, as well. And basically, this is no longer necessary or a useful piece of our brain's function, but it still is there. It's still a remnant. It still exists. It hasn't been removed from the structure and everything. This is kind of similar to, I believe it's the appendix, which used to be very useful for survival, but nowadays is not really used as much. Like, our body doesn't need it for the function it was necessarily designed for. I mean, it's still part of our body. We still have it, but a lot of people get it removed. I'm pretty sure I'm talking about the right thing here. I'm doubting myself. But some people get it removed because it, like, I think it's like your appendix bursts, you get it removed. I don't think they like replace your appendix. I think they just remove it. And I think you're okay. But I don't remember. I'm not certain about that. I'm pretty sure. And so, you know, just like your appendix can burst and can be actively harmful to you, even though it's not technically useful anymore, I think that this also is, in a way, harmful to us and also not that useful anymore. Because now that people have kind of figured out, oh, we can hack your brain by making you trust us more, yeah, that's not good. I don't like that. But I just... that's my conclusion that I came to. I don't know if that is really based on any truth. I don't have anything to source on that necessarily, but that was an idea that I had and a thought that came to me while I was, a thought that came to me that I then had to dig deeper into while styling my hair. So there's that. But yeah, I don't know. I think certain things like that are good to keep an eye on and keep in mind, because sometimes the way your brain thinks is not necessarily logical, because at one point it was, but the logical reaction is no longer logical in the modern day, because the biological body cannot keep up with the technological modern world. And so there are certain things that were perfectly logical reactions that are no longer useful and are in some cases harmful to us. And I think it's a good idea to keep that in mind and keep a lookout for it and think about how you react to things and what your initial go-to thought and reactions are for certain things that pop up, right? And, you know, you look at certain things and you go, that looks good, right? Maybe think about why it looks so good and think about why they made it look like that, right? So there's just another tie in here. Like, there's like when you go into like the candy aisle at the store, everything is such bright and nice colors. Like, it's very rare that things are going to be like gray and bland and boring. No, they're all bright, vibrant colors. And I think a reason for that is because it reminds us of fruit. And fruit is good for us and tasty, and we like it. And candy is sweet and tasty, and we like it, but it is not necessarily good for you. But seeing those bright colors makes you more inclined to eat it because it reminds you of something that is good to eat and is enjoyable to eat. And so I think it's really important to keep in mind how people have kind of figured out how the brain functions and are trying to hack it at any way possible to make profit. And so, just saying, you know, keep an eye out for it and try and be aware of it, because it's kind of sinister in a way, in my opinion, but that's just how we are, and that's the way that things are. So the best you can do is have the awareness of it, and if you're aware of it, then you're less likely to succumb to its influence. So yeah. Peace out.